Welcome to Extreme Genes, brought to you by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You have found us. It's America's family history show, Extreme Genes, and extremegenes.com. It is Fisher here on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Oh, we got a guest for you a little bit later on today. He is a professor of English at the University of New Haven. He is Dr. David Sloan, and he's the great-grandson of Thomas Edison. Yeah, and we're going to talk about Edison and his legacy and controversies surrounding that legacy, and also some family stories that were passed down that you've probably never heard before, or I've heard before. We're going to start with him coming up in about 9 minutes or so. Hey, just a reminder, if you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter, it's absolutely free. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Yeah, just go to extremegenes.com or our Facebook page and sign up right there. We give you a blog each week and, of course, links to great interviews and stories that will be fascinating to you as a genealogist. Right now, let's head out to Beantown and talk to my good friend David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. I know he barely has a voice left.
Yeah, there's a lot of lecturing going on in the month of July for me, so I'm just starting to get it back. How you doing, Fish?
I'm great. I want to hear all about this trip. You went to Pennsylvania. You were shooting World War II weapons with World War II vets in their 90s. How did all that go?
Oh, it was great. I got to fire Thompson submachine guns. I got to fire 50 caliber machine guns with guys that are aged 93 to 98 years of age. These are guys that were on B-17s and B-24s in the Pacific part of the 43rd Bomber Squadron, and my thanks to Michael and Susan, who are in charge of the group, and having me out there to give my lecture at the U.S. Army Heritage Center at the War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Very nice. Well, speak softly, David. I don't want you to hurt yourself as we go through this today, okay?
Well, I was talking over the guns. That was the problem.
Okay, I see what you've done. Yes. All right. Well, let's get to our family histoire news today, and where do you want to start?
Well, let's go across the pond to jolly old England, where actress Olivia Colman was stunned to learn about her hypocrite ancestor who had publicly accused his wife of adultery, but he had also already fathered 2 children with another woman. This was on Who Do You Think You Are this year, and I just think it's great because you just never know what you're going to find in your family tree.
No, you know, these scoundrels are on everybody's tree. We all have them. And I'm kind of proudly displaying mine just so everybody else is enabled to do the same with theirs. It doesn't change anything.
It's always good to air your dirty laundry.
That's right. Exactly right. And that's a great show, by the way. I guess she found out she had some background from India as well, Olivia Colman.
That's true. And she says that because she now has Indian roots, she has a more interesting family tree than she originally thought.
She thought she was a dull person, and there you go. She's rather exotic.
Exactly. Well, my next story goes west to Manitoba, Canada, where there is a food truck called the Manitoba Food History Truck. In fact, it's traveling the province this summer, gathering recipes and stories. So they're not just selling food, they're looking for your family stories. And, hey, maybe have your grandmother come over and cook some family recipes at the food truck.
Isn't that cool? Wouldn't that be great to have those all over the country?
I'd love to have one in Boston. Yep. I'd be there with my mother's blueberry muffin recipe and my grandmother's chocolate chip cookies and just gain calories thinking about it right now.
Swedish meatballs on our side. That'd be good.
Ooh, are they better than the ones from IKEA?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, the next story is from The Atlantic, where they talk about DNA testing shattering your identity. And Catherine St. Clair did her DNA test to find out that her paternity isn't what she thought it was. So she went out and started a Facebook group called DNA NPE Friends, referring to the non-paternity events, but this NPE is for not parent expected.
Yes, and you know, all of them kind of feel like they're alone. And she's got about 1,000 followers already that all felt that way from the beginning, and they support each other. And what a great thing. And they get new people joining it all the time who find out the shocking story that Dad wasn't Dad.
That is very true. Our next story takes us back to 1912 on the RMS Titanic. Now, I've studied the Titanic for many years, and I didn't even realize this. There were actually 8 Chinese men on board the Titanic when she set sail in April of 1912, 6 of whom actually survived, but they seem to be erased from history. So this is being featured in a new documentary about the actual story of the Titanic and these men. They came to New York, but because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, they were not allowed to stay.
Really?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and I can't wait to see it.
That's kind of interesting because they were on the ship to go to New York originally anyway. So were they not aware at the time that there was a problem with that?
I don't know, and I hope that this show will actually reveal the whole story.
Sure,
I mean, I can imagine that some of them hope to come in as laborers and maybe slip between the lines and not be noticed, but I don't know. It's a tough story.
Boy, the Titanic was just the most amazing story of all time, don't you think?
And if you think about it, the Titanic, the ship of dreams, as they say, how about if she didn't sink? Would that just be another commercial liner that went back and forth? The other thing is, by World War I, the Titanic could have been torpedoed, as many of those ships were. There were troop ships and whatnot, starting with the Lusitania, with just a commercial passenger ship. They could have lost it in World War I. So.
Yeah, that's right.
This week's Blogger Spotlight shines upon Kenneth R. Marks out of Arizona. He has a blog called The Ancestor Hunt, theancestorhunt.com/blog. And he talks about his adventures in genealogy and likes to share some of his valuable tidbits to help you get over the bumpy road of genealogy.
And it can be bumpy.
Lots of potholes, too. All right, and don't forget, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, NEHCS's website, AmericanAncestors.org, you can join and save $20 off a regular membership by using the checkout code EXTREME.
All right, thank you so much, David. And we're going to be seeing you in Fort Wayne, Indiana, coming up on August 22nd through the 25th. I'm going to be lecturing there. I'm going to be a keynote on Wednesday. David, you're going to be lecturing there as well. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we hope you can join us in the Midwest for the FGS Conference, the Federation of Genealogical Societies.
I hope my voice is back by then.
I think it will be, David. We're counting on it. And I've always found it fascinating to discover the stories of people and their families and how it's influenced their lives. And I really can't imagine that there is a more influential figure in American history than Thomas Alva Edison, the inventor of so many things that we still enjoy today, and obviously more modernized in different forms. And on the line with me right now is Dr. David Sloan. He is a professor of English at the University of New Haven, and he's a great-grandson of Thomas Edison. How are you, Dr. Sloan? Great to have you on the show.
I'm fine. It's nice to be here.
I've admired your great-grandfather for many years. I have a letter of his hanging on my wall that he wrote to a neighbor's aunt in 1885 when he was wiring New York for electricity, and she invited him to dinner. And so what I have was his handwritten acceptance of that invitation to dinner, and I've always enjoyed having that. And I was reading your story a little bit, and I was seeing, for instance, a few years ago, you had a visit with a guy who was the great-grandson of Edward Léon Scott de Martinville. And he, of course, was one of the early people to delve into audio as well. He had what do they call it, the phonautograph, where he was actually able to record some audio but wasn't ever able to play it. And I guess there has been some controversy over the years about Thomas Edison and this guy de Martinville. But you were delightful. I saw this video of you meeting with him and just sharing that commonality. I cannot imagine that your ancestors' influence has not extended into your life to some degree.
Well, it's something to think about. It's a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
I will say that. I recall being interviewed at one point when I started working on Life of my grandmother, Madeline Edison, as Edison's daughter, that the interviewer said to me, "How is it that none of the descendants of Thomas Edison did anything noteworthy?"
Wow. Ouch.
And I said, "By nothing noteworthy, do you mean my 7 books on Mark Twain and American humor or my brother's 14 medical patents?" And he said, "Oh, I guess that was a rather rude question, wasn't it?" And actually, the interviewer was very sweet about it. He was a lovely guy. It's just that people don't think about that. You can't follow an act with 1,078 patents in it and look like you're a massive inventive genius, because that's a one-of-a-kind thing.
Well, and the reality is, I would imagine inventors like your great-grandfather also got a lot of credit for things that people came up with in their employ, did they not?
Yeah, and by design. Edison, one of his best inventions, and there was no patent on this one, was the working invention factory, the laboratory, and the clinical experimenting empirical lab. And he was very much dependent on guys like John Cruzy, the mechanic, who
Right.
built all the machine models that he used to test out and to work things. So the first phonograph was not built by Edison. It was built by John Cruzy to Edison's design.
Specifics. And I think that's really kind of typical of the era. The difference is, of course, is that we hear all the credit going to one person. I had a great uncle who lived in the late 1800s, and he created a double stage on Broadway. And it was the Madison Square Theater. And so in order to cut down time in between scenes to like 40 seconds or so, they had an elevator that they lifted and lowered. And then when the stage was way up at the top, they're changing for the next scene. Or if it's down in a pit underneath, they're changing for the next scene. And it revolutionized theater at the time. But the guy who got the credit for it was the guy who hired him, who had the idea, but it was this ancestor of mine who actually went and put together the mechanics for it, and he got all the patents for it.
Well, you know, that takes me right back to the first thing you mentioned, which was Scott de Martinville and the invention of the phone autograph. And thank you for your compliment on my little talk, which I was very flattered to be invited to give. But I think that it doesn't take anything away from Edison to say that this Frenchman de Martinville had indeed recorded sound. Yeah, there it is. And it's wonderful, but also amazing that it wasn't until the year 2007, about 150 years later, that the technology was created and in place so that you could actually listen to the sound he recorded.
Yes.
Say, oh yeah, this is the real thing. He actually got it, but we didn't have a way of visibly reading it. Edison developed a way of recording sound that was not so very dissimilar in its recording process from what de Martinville did, but he also developed a mechanical as opposed to a visual way of playing it back. And that's the only difference.
Sure.
So really, yeah, they were both parts, as you rightly said, they were both part of the same wave of technology. And more credit to both of them. I think it's
absolutely. Was this the recording of Clair de Lune that I recall from the 1860s that they played back? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. It was like on paper, wasn't it? It was all these little lines, and somebody figured out how to level out the variations in the speed of whatever it is he used to make these marks on there. And you could hear a woman in the 1860s singing Clair de Lune in France. Just an unbelievable thing, but as you mentioned, there was no way ever to hear it.
Yeah, now we understand this because we see sound on a screen, an oscilloscope, and we don't think anything of it. We see the lines going up and down. Every time you play something on a computer, you could see a little up and down jagged line going anytime you record something. And to us, that seems, oh yeah, of course, that's the way you do it. But there was no way of reading that until the oscilloscope and its children and grandchildren themselves were invented by inventors who were looking visually through tubes and wires and a whole lot of complex technological elements that never even existed in 1856.
So these types of controversies, which I think to a large extent are conjured up by media people, don't bother you too much, do they?
No, they really don't, and the Tesla-Edison thing is one of the ones that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And people try and make some kind of conspiracy, and the Tesla advocates vilify Edison and so on. But in fact, Tesla and Edison weren't opposed to each other. They had very different ways of thinking about transmitting power. And Tesla's AC power ideas were picked up by Westinghouse, and those are the ones that we went with, whether for good or ill, because transferring power over long lines is one way of doing it. The problem is that the DC power that Edison backed was locally generated, and while it might have been slower to develop, we would have had a far more diverse ability to use and manufacture power for ourselves, and we might not be in this pickle we're in now of having energy problems and energy transfer problems.
Well, maybe we could go back and just pick up where he was.
there are all these different arguments, but the fact of the matter is Tesla wasn't a very good businessman, and his problems were not caused by his inventiveness or lack thereof. His problems were caused by the fact that he couldn't manage what he was doing in a way that could appeal to investors.
I'm talking to Dr. David Sloan. He's a professor of English at the University of New Haven. He is a great-grandson of Thomas Edison. How much do you think about him? How many things you deal with every day remind you of him?
Oh, I don't think of him that often. Now, when I was more actively consulting and going around the country teaching writing and speaking courses, every now and then I would fly into LaGuardia or Kennedy at night and say, gee, I wish I had a penny for every one of those light bulbs I'm looking at. But that's not the way it works out.
No, it doesn't, I'm sure. I mean, your family really didn't make a whole lot in the generations that ensued, did they?
No. Edison he was not really very interested in setting up big inheritances, and most of the Edison money in his own time he plowed back into the business and into the business of making more inventions. So really all of the descendants of Thomas Edison are basically working like you are, you know, teachers, dentists, engineers, there's a financial manager in there, one who's in ecology. I've got a daughter who is taking a law class and a cousin who's a lawyer. They're typical middle-class Americans.
Sure. Are you all in touch? Do you have reunions?
No, we don't have reunions, alas, and I wish we did. Getting us all together from different places in the country would be a little tricky, and some of us are in direct touch through the Edison Birthplace Association, which is in Milan, Ohio, which is open as a little house tourist museum. And several of us are on the board on that and interested in seeing that it's financially sustainable, which it is basically through tourist dollars and a few grants here and there, but it's a very modest operation.
Now, how many of you are there as far as living descendants go right now? Do you know?
Living descendants, somewhere around, I guess, 16 or 20. Interestingly enough, Edison had 6 children. He had 2 wives. His first wife died after having a girl and 2 boys, and he married again. He married a woman named Mina Miller from Ohio, and Mina Miller, Edison, and Thomas had 3 children also, Madeline, my grandmother, and Ted and Jack. Edison's daughter was the only one of his 6 children to have children.
Wow.
All right. So, no, not a big group at all.
Tell us some of the stories that you heard passed down. Did your mother know Thomas Edison?
No. My own mother and father were married in 1938.
Okay.
And Edison died in 1931.
Okay. And what about your dad as a grandson?
Yep. My father had memories of Edison, but chief among the memories was he was very hard to communicate with because he was just about stone deaf during my father's childhood. And he really tended to get lost in his own thoughts. He was always working on something. And it became very obvious to Edison in the 1920s that America was dependent on foreign sources of rubber in a way that made us extremely vulnerable in the event of a world war that might cut off the supply lines for rubber from Asia.
Okay, and we've just been through a world war, and obviously another was yet to come.
Yes, and he, I think, may have had that sense. A lot of people at the end of the First World War were looking very gloomily at the world situation and weren't pleased, and especially weren't pleased what was going on the Pacific Rim because of Japanese resentment at American intrusions. And Edison was thinking, we need a domestic source of rubber. So he started working on goldenrod, and he was growing goldenrod up to 14 feet high.
And did it work?
And getting the sap. He was just starting to get the kinds of sap that he thought he needed and the returns he was looking for when the Germans developed a chemical process for synthesizing rubber using petroleum. And that made his goldenrod experiments commercially unattractive.
Yeah, that makes sense. So did your dad see some of this in his youth?
Yeah, there are pictures of Edison standing beside mounted 14-foot plants on a board and things like that. And that was very much what he was doing at the Edison Winter Home in Florida for years and years. And Ted and Jack and Peter, the three boys of Madeline, who were young enough to go to Florida during the winter and have tutors down there for a month or two sometimes, and they would have auto trips and they would do some fishing. That's where they learned to swim. You know, they had some experience of that winter home. Madeline, my grandmother, gave me a number of Edison stories because he was a much more direct figure in her life.
Sure.
And one of the most memorable, I'm recalling, and it was certainly one of the most memorable for her, in fact, took place at Glenmont in West Orange, New Jersey, where Edison lived and which he is often identified with. And Madeline, we called her Toots, by the way, in her older
Great
years.
name.
Toots told me that she was leaning back on her sort of ottoman and she had high lace boots on, and the maid was pulling up the laces for her, and Papa walked by the door and looked in and saw that and was very angry and yelled at her and said he never wanted to see anything like that ever again from one of his children. He never wanted to see them lying back and letting somebody else lace their boots.
Okay. Laziness.
He was, a very active person and also a very egalitarian person. And you know what I mean when I say he believed in the equality of the people who worked for him and himself in a way that was very, very uncompromising. And in fact, there is a story, it's not in the books that I recall, but Madeline told me specifically that at the end of World War I, they were having a reception for soldiers, and there was a lot of bunting being draped around Glenmont, and there were several hundred soldiers coming back to be celebrated, and the Irish maid who was working from the kitchen was asked to take sandwiches to a black seamstress who was sewing up some of the curtains for this reception. And she refused, at which point Madeline's mother, Mina, fired her on the spot.
Wow.
And
That's a
as
statement.
far as the Edisons were concerned, there was no barrier racially to, working together.
And that's interesting because a lot of the major industrialists back at that time that he hung with, like Henry Ford, is well known for his racist positions.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to comment on that, and I'm not an expert in it. I do know that the Edisons themselves believe pretty strongly in the equality of people.
Now, I read somewhere that the Lindbergh baby kidnapping had an effect on your family.
Yes, very much so. My dad worked as a time study engineer in the rubber industry in the Naugatuck Valley in Connecticut. And he didn't make a lot of money. In fact, the only money he made was pretty much spent on household expenses and stuff. And our parents were very afraid because of what had happened with the Lindberghs, that if it were known that we were related to Edison, that would encourage some kidnapper to want to kidnap my brother and I think my aunt and uncles felt the same way, or their children. And so we were very strongly cautioned never to tell anyone that we were related to Thomas Edison.
That's fascinating. At what point did you become aware of him in your life and his significance to the world?
Well, there are different levels of awareness.
Sure.
I met Mina Miller Edison as a 3 or 4 year old, and she was a kindly old lady, sitting in a chair with a woolen comforter over her legs.
And this is your great-grandmother?
Yeah, this would be Edison's wife.
Mm-hmm.
But as a 4-year-old, I'm not sure that I really registered that as in any way historic linkage. And we had a picture book, Thomas Edison father of invention, I'm trying to think of it. Copies can be gotten from the gift store at the Edison National Historic Site or from the Edison birthplace. But it was a picture book, sort of a cartoon book of Edison's life, about 40 or 50 pages long, so pretty thick and very good. And I was sort of given that, and I basically learned what I knew about Edison out of that picture book, and learned it very incompletely because I didn't read the text. I just looked at the pictures.
Yeah, right. Like all 4-year-olds.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much that awareness impacted me. All I knew was that it was something that shouldn't be mentioned, out in public and made much of because it was potentially a bad thing.
A bad thing. Did you actually understand the risk that was involved when you were being told that young, we don't talk about it? Did you understand the reason behind it at the time?
I understood that my parents were concerned, and that was the level of understanding. It didn't strike fear into me because I don't think an 8 or 10-year-old kid really thinks about that.
Sure. What an amazing background, Dave, and we sure appreciate you taking the time to share some of these stories and its impact on your life, and what a fascinating man and what a fascinating life you have already lived, as you mentioned earlier, writing all these great books and doing great things yourself.
Well, I thank you very much. It's fun to talk about all this good stuff.
I appreciate it, Dave, and thanks for coming on.
You bet.
It is time to talk preservation on Extreme Genes, America's family history show, and extremegenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, with Tom Perry from tmcplace.com. He's our preservation authority. Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Really, really good. How you been doing?
It's been hot, and I've been thinking, yes, I've been driving past homes, and I'm thinking, okay, in the West, it's like triple digits, very dry, and in the East, it's upper 80s, lower 90s, 100% humidity, and it crossed my mind that, oh my gosh, look at all these houses, and I wonder how many of them have old home movies and old photographs and whatever up in their attics right now. The bugs are at their peak right now. This would be the worst time, right? This is when they go lay eggs, and it'll get bad again in the winter when everything's too cold and you got rodents up in there. What a great time this would be before the kids are back in school to get up in there and rescue your family treasures before they are further destroyed.
In fact, you mentioned some great things about the bugs, even something as simple as a mosquito, how small they are. If they get inside a box with photos and lay eggs, even though they're never going to hatch because there's no water involved, they're going to make these little black spots size of a pinhead all over your photos, and those are almost impossible to get off. So even though there's not going to be any eggs that hatch, you're still going to have those. Whereas the roaches, they're going to climb in there, they're going to lay eggs, and as soon as the roaches are hatched, they're going to start munching on the closest thing, and unfortunately, they're your photographs.
They do get hungry after hatching, don't they?
They do. Yeah, they are, and they're carnivorous. They'll eat anything.
Well, and we talk about this all the time about where to store your things, and Tom, you've given some great advice over the years about not putting it, say, in a closet with an outdoor wall that borders on the outdoors, because that's where the temperatures change from one extreme to the other every 6 months. So this is the time to get those things out of those extremes. I'm just thinking, we've got to call for a rescue mission here for some people who've been sleeping on the job.
Oh, yeah, and absolutely. And a lot of our new listeners have no clue about that kind of information, that they need to make sure they get these away from places that are going to be extremes. Like we've talked about, cold isn't good for them. Hot's not good for them. But even if you're kind of in not too hot, not too cold, but it's going back and forth with air conditioners and heaters and the ducts running over on top of your photos and slides and videos and things like this, those changes in temperature are actually going to be worse than extreme heat constantly or extreme cold constantly. So that can actually be a bad thing, having it in your closet by a heating duct.
And I should mention, too, there is hope. I mean, if you're going up there and it's that hot, I had a friend of mine who did this. He went up in the attic, and it was just smoking hot, and he was going through some things, and he found a whole bunch of reels of old home movies from the 50s and 60s. And he was horrified. Oh, my gosh, they're going to be destroyed. Went out and got them digitized, and they were decent. They can be salvaged, but remember that every day the clock is ticking on these things.
Yeah, we've had people that have brought things in. They go, I don't want to put this on my projector and ruin it. And sometimes we open them and they're fine. We had one customer that had about 18 reels of 16-millimeter film up in a closet. And unfortunately, it was right on an air duct, so it had hot and cold constantly going through it. Oh. And the first can totally toast. All it was dust. But the farther it got away from it, it kind of insulated it. So the last 6 reels were fine. They looked beautiful, but the first few reels were totally toast. Some of them were disintegrated. Some of them had warped and cracked so bad that there was nothing really there to transfer. And also, if they have warped a little bit and stretched a little bit, we have a special device. It's actually called a belt transfer. It doesn't use the sprockets. It's a belt. And so we can still transfer some things that have been warped. So don't think, all hope is lost. Come in with the best that you have, or contact somebody in your area that does the same kind of services and say, hey, this is what I have. What can I do? And get them to help you. If you have questions, you can always email us or go on our Facebook page and ask us questions. And we're more than happy to help you and tell you who's in your area that's the closest that can help you if you're too far away to bring it in here.
Tom, we were just talking about this idea of going and rescuing stuff right now in the peak of summer from out of attics, wherever they may be. Humidity's destroying things, heat's destroying things. 6 months from now, we'll be talking about the cold and the rodents up there. But, off air, you had a great idea, and that the idea was to, take the kids up into the attic with you and go search for some of this stuff and pull this stuff out and share stories and record it while you're doing it. I mean, what a great family history experience right there that can cover multiple generations.
Oh, absolutely. Bring your iPhone, your Android, a recording device, whatever you have, and just put it on record. And then start going through boxes and the interaction with you and your kids. You might get some incredible stories about showing them photos, and maybe they even remember some of the people in the photos, even though maybe they were 8 or 9 years old. You'll get some great stories that later on you'll be able to go and drop into an editing program, put these photos that you're looking at with them, and you're going to have a keepsake that's just absolutely incredible.
It's funny, as we talk about this stuff, I'm able to actually smell what my attic smelled like in Connecticut when I was growing up. And remember the mouse traps my mom had to put up there periodically, because in the winter you could hear them scattering around. It was awful. I mean, thinking, what a terrible place to store things. And fortunately, she kept them in cabinets in a living room away from vents. And I don't think she had any idea of what she was doing or why she was doing it. But we didn't have any issues with things being stored in extreme heat or cold, or even the alternating things. And we've been very fortunate, because as a result of that, pretty much everything we've had that dates back even to home movies from the 1940s have preserved really quite well.
Yeah, you're one of the fortunate ones, and that's smart that your mother was inspired or whatever caused her to do it that way. But a lot of us, unfortunately, just have shoe boxes and things like this that the bugs can get into. And the thing is, once you go in and clean them up and take care of them and scan them or do whatever, if you don't have time to scan them right now, at least repatriate them, take them out of those boxes, put them in the double boxes with a styrofoam. If the attic's the only place you can store them, it's either that or nowhere, then you can do that. But make sure you do the things we've talked about on other episodes. Get a box within a box with styrofoam from Lowe's or Home Depot that's going to kind of insulate it. Get the long grain rice in cheesecloth tied up with string to get the moisture away from it. All these different tricks we've been talking about over the years are going to make it a lot better. So if that's the only place you can store it, that's what you've got to do. So let's make the best of what we have in this situation. And then as soon as you can, start getting the things transferred. If it's 1 tape a month, that's fine. That's 12 more tapes in a year than you would have had otherwise.
Yeah, that's a really good point, too. The kids will be back in school here in a few weeks, and then maybe you'll have a little more time to get to see somebody like Tom around the country who can help you out with that. And you're right. You chip away at it, because if you were to try to do the whole thing at one time, it's expensive. There's no doubt about it. But what price is too much to preserve those memories? I mean, they're irreplaceable. They're one of a kind. And wouldn't your mom and dad be very upset if you let them rot, right, Tom?
Exactly. And that's one thing you have to look at. It's not just you're preserving them. These make great Christmas gifts, anniversaries, birthdays, all kinds of things. And, you go and spend a couple $100 on a new flat screen television for them. That's going to last them 6 months, a year, 2 months as technology changes. But these memories they're going to have forever. And use them as creative gifts. It just makes it so much better, and it'll save you money in the long run.
There's your thought, right? Use it as a part of your Christmas budget.
Exactly.
All right, Tom, great thoughts, and get up in that attic and get things cleared out, people. All right, we'll talk to you again next week, Tom. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Hey, that's it for this week. Thanks so much for joining us. And thanks, of course, to Dr. David Sloan, great-grandson of Thomas Edison, who joined us earlier on the show. If you missed any part of it, or you want to hear it again, or you want to share it with someone, of course, catch the podcast. It's on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and ExtremeGenes.com and other places. And don't forget to sign up for our weekly Genie newsletter. We link to all kinds of great interviews from the past and the present, and links to stories that you as a genealogist will find fascinating. Talk to you next week, and remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family. This has been Extreme Genes. Share your family story by going to FamilySearch.org.